All right, so let's pick up on the energy issue, which has rapidly become the hot button issue of this election. We are in stage 4 load shedding. The Public Enterprises Minister reassuring South Africa that overnight we'll be back to level 3 and the day after that, hopefully, to level 2. The ANC signalling their concern it's going to cost them votes if load shedding continues like this. Also suspicious there may be elements within Eskom that are trying to deliberately cause power disruptions. We've got Chris Yelland, energy expert, on the line, but also in studio, ENCA election analyst Mapaseka Muroa joining us to look at the political side of it, because there's definitely politics involved here. Chris, I'd just like to start with you. We're having problems with your line a little earlier. Listening to that briefing, do you have sympathy for Eskom and what the minister is trying to do, that they are dealing with years of incompetence, massive corruption, and they're doing their level best? Or do you have sympathy for South Africans and many of the journalists asking questions saying, you've just had too long, this is unacceptable?
No, I must say I have sympathy with Eskom and the minister. I think Eskom is doing what it can do. It can work on maintenance, but maintenance is not the ultimate solution, and there are diminishing returns from a maintenance of very old, damaged plant that is reached end of life, and in some cases beyond end of life. The real answer, of course, we have to get Medupi and Kusile online. It's coming on slowly, but there's a legacy of problems dating back 10 years that need rectification. And that means shutting down generators, which means less availability to meet demand. So the Kusile Medupi issue is something Eskom can do. Maintenance is something Eskom can do. But the real answer comes from replacing this old generation fleet. And we know that something like 22,000 megawatts of old coal-fired plant has got to be decommissioned in the next 15 years and replaced. And the public procurements for this replacement are way too slow. It's not good enough. Since 2019, October, when the Integrated Resource Plan for Electricity was published, not a single kilowatt of public procured new generation capacity has come onto the grid. Yes, there are processes in place, but they are stalled, they're taking too long, they're delayed, there are big gaps. IRP is out of date, needs to be reworked in order to fill these gaps. And this is outside of the ambit of Eskom and the DPE, and is firmly in the hands of the DMRE. And therein lies the ultimate problem. The old plant is getting older every year. New plant is performing like old plant, and new generation capacity is coming on way too slowly in the public procurement space. And the only solutions really in the next 3 years or for the private sector to embark on self-generation, distributed generation, and embedded generation in order to secure at least part of their own energy needs and reduce the burden on Eskom, which is clearly unable to meet in the light of this aging plant and the delayed new procurement.
Yeah. Chris, stand by for us, because there's also politics when it comes to this stage for load shedding, because the ANC Mapaseka is now entered the fray, basically issuing damning statements against Eskom, and the Public Enterprises Minister saying that they want answers, which we might have got tonight, depending on how you look at it. Let's talk about the electorate. How do South Africans actually take this in and go to the polls on Monday? Will it have any impact on who they decide to vote for?
I think the first thing I'd like to remind South Africans that it was in 1998 that the African National Congress knew that the current power supply wouldn't be able to sustain South Africans. So a white paper comes out, and already they knew. It was only in 2008 that Kusile was constructed, or rather the construction began. So this just adds on to a long list of things, political own goals by the governing party. It's, you know, the dam that's been built in Vembe, but there's no line to the people to get water to them. It is the PPE corruption. So it adds on to the long list of things that already exist. But the issue is South Africans, when it comes to voting, are very tricky. You know, there's the resemblance theory that they use to vote. So in areas like Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, where the African National Congress has a stronghold, it's not going to affect them that much. But in areas in the big metros like Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane, Johannesburg, city of Ekurhuleni, that's when we might see them take some knock. But in areas like the Eastern Cape and in Mpumalanga, where they do have a stronghold, I don't expect that this affects them very much.
Chris, I want to ask you a little bit about this issue of this person who was immediately fired. The warning light flashed for 2 hours. Chris, do you believe, as the ANC believes, that there are possibly elements within Eskom trying to undermine power supply for political ends?
My personal view is that I have absolutely no evidence to that effect. And I think raising issues based on surmise and conjecture is wrong. If there is solid evidence or any evidence to back this up, it should be brought. But this innuendo that we saw in the statement today, I don't think is helpful at all. I honestly don't believe in complex conspiracy theories when there are much simpler causes that are quite evident. And those causes, as I said before, old plant getting older by the year, new plant performing like old plant and coming on the grid too slowly, and new capacity procurements that have not even started since the level 6 load shedding in December 2019. 2 years later, we haven't even procured the emergency IPP procurement program. And I must agree with your political analyst that this is a series of political own goals. You know, as has been said, the issues have been on the table for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And the politicians have pretended they didn't exist or looked the other way. And now, just before the election, suddenly they're pointing fingers at everybody except themselves. And the people at the coalface, as it were, in Eskom, who have got limited capacity to deal with what has to be done,
as the
they
minister
can't deal with
said,
it.
new and extraordinary things need to happen.
Definitely. Tell me, did the ANC do itself any justice by issuing this statement? Because they ultimately are calling into question one of their own in government.
I mean, it's an attempt to try and get ahead of the issue, but let's not pretend like load shedding started yesterday. It's an issue that's been present and prevalent in this country. So on one hand, the fact that the minister didn't even take responsibility, that's an issue. Had he taken responsibility and said, look, we knew this issue was an issue since 1998. It's been 23 years, and we haven't effectively dealt with it. So again, political on goal, they did not take responsibility. It was a waste of time.
Do you think the fact that Andre de Ruyter and the minister appeared together is a show of support on the minister's part for Andre de Ruyter and the management?
It does. I think to both of them. But whether or not South Africans believe that there are new things coming is another conversation altogether.
How did it land?
How many more promises? How many
Mapaseka
more?
Muroa, thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Yeah, and also Chris Yelland, energy expert, talking to us about what we've just heard.